Kale was a skilled engineer, known for his independence and talent. He had worked on countless missions in the far reaches of the galaxy, but none had been quite like this one. Today, he was just doing a simple delivery, bringing supplies to a small colony on a distant planet. The routine job had seemed like just another day in his spacefaring career. Yet, it would turn out to be the beginning of something far beyond anything he could ever have imagined. As he navigated his ship through the quiet expanse of space, Kale thought about the life he had built. He had never really cared for politics or grand causes. To him, the mission was always the most important thing. He kept to himself, focused on the job at hand. But that was about to change. The small transport ship he piloted was designed for basic cargo, nothing too flashy. He wasn't one for luxuries. The hum of the engines and the soft glow of the ship's control panel were his constant companions. The colony he was headed to was located on a planet far from the bustling centers of galactic power. Kale enjoyed the peace that came with being away from the chaos of the core worlds. But there were other things he could never quite ignore. He had always felt that there was more to the universe than just being a cog in the machine. As the ship began to enter the planet's atmosphere, Kale received an unexpected communication from the station. It wasn't the usual docking request, nor was it the voice of a familiar commander. No, this was something different. The voice was calm but carried an authority that instantly captured his attention. "Captain Kale, we have a special request for you," the voice said. "Please proceed to the Vale station for an unscheduled stop. We've been instructed to have you dock immediately upon arrival." Kale raised an eyebrow. The Vale station. He had heard of it, of course. The Vale were a powerful and mysterious race of aliens who controlled vast territories. Their technology was beyond anything Kale had ever encountered, and their politics were wrapped in layers of secrecy. Why would they need his ship for anything? But orders were orders. He reluctantly adjusted the ship's course and made his way to the station. When he docked at the Vale station, Kale wasn't sure what to expect. The station itself was unlike any other he had seen. It was massive, stretching out like a spider's web with sleek silver structures that seemed to hum with energy. The walls glowed with a faint blue light, and the air felt charged with a sense of otherworldly power. The Vale themselves were even more imposing. They were tall and elegant, with skin that shimmered in hues of silver and violet. Their eyes glowed with a strange intensity, and their presence seemed to command respect without them having to say a word. Kale felt a flicker of unease as he stepped off the ship, but he pushed it aside. He was a professional, after all. He was escorted down a long corridor, the sound of his boots echoing off the polished floors. The air was cooler here, and the faint scent of something unfamiliar lingered in the atmosphere. Kale couldn't help but feel like he was walking through the heart of something far beyond his understanding. This station was a place of power, and he was nothing more than a small speck in its grand design. As he reached the main hall, the figure that awaited him took Kale by surprise. A woman stood before him, tall and regal, her presence commanding attention in a way Kale had never felt before. She was dressed in an elaborate, flowing robe made of a material that shimmered like liquid metal. Her hair was long and silver, cascading down her back like a waterfall of light. But it was her eyes that captured his attention, eyes that glowed with an ethereal light, a violet hue that seemed to peer right through him. "I am Princess Lyra of the Vale," she said, her voice smooth and cold, yet carrying a hint of something else, something that Kale couldn't quite place. Kale's instincts told him that this was no ordinary encounter. The Vale were not known for their hospitality, especially not to humans. He had heard rumors about their aristocratic society, how they treated lesser species as nothing more than pawns in their political games. He had no intention of becoming entangled in any of their schemes. "Princess Lyra," Kale said, bowing slightly, his voice measured. "I've been given no explanation for this stop. What can I do for you?" Lyra's gaze lingered on him for a moment, studying him with an intensity that made Kale feel like he was being assessed, weighed on some invisible scale. Then, without warning, she spoke again, and her words hit Kale like a sudden blow. "You belong to me as my husband," she said, her tone flat and matter-of-fact, as if the statement was simply a known truth. Kale blinked in disbelief. He must have heard wrong. "Excuse me?" he asked, his voice faltering slightly. "I said," Lyra repeated, her voice unyielding, "you belong to me as my husband." The words hung in the air like a heavy weight. Kale could feel the world around him shift, the room growing heavier, as if the very foundation of reality was warping to accommodate the absurdity of what she had just said. His first instinct was to laugh, but the seriousness in her eyes kept him from doing so. "Look," Kale began, his tone a little sharper now, "I'm not sure what kind of joke this is, but I'm not interested in any galactic marriage arrangements." Lyra didn't flinch at his response. Instead, she reached into the folds of her robe and pulled out a small, intricate device. With a few quick gestures, she activated it, and the air around them seemed to crackle with energy. Kale instinctively took a step back, but Lyra didn't seem concerned. She was unfazed by his reaction. The device projected a hologram before him, and Kale's eyes widened in shock. The hologram displayed an ancient-looking document, filled with symbols and writing that he didn't understand. But it was the name at the bottom that caused his heart to skip a beat. His name. Kale. "This," Lyra said, her voice cool and detached, "is the Galactic contract. It's a binding agreement that cannot be broken. The moment you set foot on this station, you became my husband, according to the laws of the galaxy." Kale stared at the hologram in disbelief. He had heard of such contracts, ancient and powerful, binding individuals to relationships that could never be undone. But he had never imagined something like this happening to him. He had never signed anything, never agreed to any such arrangement. And yet here it was, staring him in the face, an undeniable truth. This is impossible," Kale muttered, trying to process what was happening. "I didn't sign anything, I don't even know you." Lyra's expression remained unchanged. "It doesn't matter, the contract is older than both of us. Once the contract is in place, there is no escaping it." Kale shook his head, still in disbelief. "So what, I'm just supposed to, what, marry you?" Lyra's violet eyes met his with a cold, calculating gaze. "Yes, you are to be my husband. The contract has been set. There is no turning back." Kale opened his mouth to protest again, but the words died on his lips. He felt trapped, caught in a situation that was beyond his control. There was no escaping this, not now. "What happens now?" Kale asked, his voice quieter, resigned. Lyra's lips curled into a small, imperceptible smile. "Now you begin your life as my husband. You will come with me and we will face the challenges that lie ahead. The galaxy is a vast and complicated place, and together we will shape its future." Kale took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. This wasn't the life he had planned. He had always believed that his future was his own, that he could make his own choices. But now it seemed as though the galaxy had other plans for him. He didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was clear. His life would never be the same again. Kale stood in the vast chamber, the hum of the alien station echoing around him as he tried to process the situation he found himself in. The weight of Lyra's words seemed to press down on him like a heavy stone. "You belong to me as my husband." The phrase kept repeating in his mind, mocking him with its absurdity. He had never imagined that his life could take such a turn. One moment he was on a simple cargo mission, and the next he was bound by a contract to an alien princess. His thoughts raced as he tried to gather his composure. This was all too much, too sudden. He had always been in control of his life, making decisions for himself, and now it seemed as though the universe had decided otherwise. He looked at Lyra, who stood calmly before him, her gaze unwavering. There was no sign of humor in her eyes, no hint of a trick. She wasn't playing some elaborate prank. She was serious. Lyra, the Veil Princess, had spoken those words with such authority that Kale couldn't even begin to question them. He had never heard of such a thing, the Galactic contract. He had read about it in passing, old, ancient laws that governed the relationships between races, some too powerful to defy. But to be swept up in one, that was something entirely different. "I didn't sign anything," Kale said again, his voice firmer this time, though doubt still lingered in his chest. This is insane." Lyra's expression remained as calm as ever. "The contract is beyond your choice, Kale. It was forged long before either of us were born. You are now bound by it." Kale took a step back, his hands running through his hair in frustration. He didn't know how to react. He had always prided himself on his independence. How could this happen to him? How could a piece of paper, some ancient contract, control his life so completely? He had no say in the matter, and now it seemed that there was nothing he could do. "How is this possible?" Kale asked, his voice quiet but filled with disbelief. "I'm a human. I'm not part of your world. I don't belong here." Lyra tilted her head slightly, a gesture that might have been a sign of curiosity, but there was something else in it too, a cold, distant understanding. That is the way of the galaxy, Kale. Power is not about what you think you are or where you come from. It is about what binds you to the stars, to the contracts that govern all things. And you, whether you like it or not, are now bound to me. Kale's mind raced as he tried to grasp what she was saying. He felt trapped, caught in a web of rules and traditions that he had never known existed. He had spent his life working as an engineer, moving from job to job, doing what needed to be done. He had never been interested in politics or power struggles. But now those things were thrust upon him, and for some reason it felt like there was no way out. "I don't want this," Kale muttered under his breath. He knew it was a futile protest, but it was all he could say. He wanted to be free to make his own choices. But that freedom had just been taken from him. Lyra studied him for a moment, her violet eyes calculating. "It does not matter what you want, Kale. What matters is that you are now part of something much larger than yourself. The fate of the galaxy is often shaped by forces beyond the understanding of those caught within it. You may not understand it now, but soon you will see the importance of our bond." Kale shook his head, the weight of her words sinking deeper into his chest. "This is crazy. I'm just a simple guy. I don't belong in your world." But Lyra didn't respond. She simply motioned for him to follow her. With a reluctant sigh, Kale followed her down the corridor of the station. The walls, gleaming with alien technology, seemed to stretch on forever, a never-ending maze of cold metal and glowing lights. As they walked, Kale tried to wrap his mind around what had just happened. He had always lived in a world where his actions had consequences, where things made sense. Now none of it made sense. Nothing felt real. Lyra led him into a large, open room where a series of holographic images floated in midair. The images flickered and changed, showing different parts of the galaxy, planets, ships, and stars. Kale could barely focus on them, his mind too preoccupied with his situation. "You are not just anyone, Kale," Lyra said, breaking the silence. "You have been chosen for a reason. The Veil do not make decisions lightly. When we choose a mate, it is because we see something in them, something that others do not." Kale glanced at her, his brow furrowed. "Chosen? I don't even know you. We've never met before." "That is true," Lyra acknowledged. "But the contract goes beyond simple knowledge. It is a bond that is forged across time and space. It is not a decision based on emotion or personal preference. It is a decision of power, of balance. And now you are part of that balance." Kale couldn't believe what he was hearing. He was just a human, a small part of a vast, indifferent galaxy. He had never asked for any of this. But here he was, tied to a princess who spoke of power, contracts, and destiny as if they were the only things that mattered. "Why me?" Kale asked, the question slipping out before he could stop himself. "Why did you choose me? What's so special about me?" Lyra's eyes softened, but only slightly. "You may not see it now, but you have strength, Kale. A strength that lies not in your power or status, but in your resilience. You have the ability to adapt, to survive, and that is what the Veil need." Kale didn't know what to say. He was just a man trying to get through life. But now he was supposed to be the husband of a powerful alien princess. His world had been turned upside down, and he couldn't find a way to make sense of it. "You're going to need to learn about our ways, Kale," Lyra said. "You are no longer just a human. You are my husband, and you will take your place beside me. The galaxy will see you as part of the Veil." The weight of her words hit him again, heavier this time. His mind raced. "What does that even mean? What happens now?" Lyra didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned to one of the holographic displays. "You will accompany me to Vale. There, we will face the challenges that come with your new position. We will have to navigate the political landscape of our empire, and your presence will play a crucial role in securing our future. The Galactic contract binds you to me, but it also gives you power. Power that you will need if we are to survive the trials ahead." Kale stood still, trying to take in everything she had said. He felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure: his life would never be the same again. He was no longer just Kale, the independent engineer. He was now bound by the Galactic contract, tied to an alien princess, and part of a much larger game that he didn't understand. Lyra turned back to him, her expression unreadable. "I know this is difficult for you, but this is the way things must be. You will have time to adjust, but the galaxy will not wait for you to figure it out. We must act quickly." Cale nodded slowly, though doubt still lingered in his chest. He didn't know if he could ever accept this new life, but for now he had no choice. He was trapped, bound by forces beyond his understanding. As Lyra motioned for him to follow her again, Cale couldn't help but feel a sense of dread wash over him. He had always been a man who controlled his own destiny. But now his future was in the hands of a powerful alien princess, and there was no turning back. Cale sat in the quiet of his new quarters, staring out the window at the expanse of stars stretching infinitely before him. He had been given a room on the Vale station, one that was far more luxurious than anything he had ever encountered in his life. The room was sleek and modern, with walls that shimmered in the soft, bluish light of the station's artificial atmosphere. The bed was large, covered with soft fabrics that looked as if they were woven from some alien material. It was a far cry from the small, functional rooms he was used to back on his ship, but none of the luxury mattered. He couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. The Galactic contract. His life was no longer his own. He was now bound to Lyra, the Vale Princess, by a force far more powerful than he could understand, and he had no choice but to follow through. Cale had spent the past few days trying to come to terms with his new reality. It wasn't easy. Every moment he spent in the Vale station, the weight of the contract pressed down on him more heavily. He was still reeling from the shock of it all. He had never asked for any of this. He had never imagined that his life would be taken in such an unexpected direction. And yet here he was, tied to an alien princess with no way out. He couldn't help but think about the life he had left behind. The quiet missions, the simple work of being an engineer. He had lived a solitary life, focused on his career, never thinking about anything bigger than the next job. Now he was caught in a web of politics, power, and destiny. He didn't even know what his role was supposed to be in all of this. The door to his quarters slid open, and Lyra entered. She was as calm as ever, her expression unreadable. She moved with the grace and elegance of someone who was used to power. Cale had always admired her beauty, but now it seemed like just another reminder of how far out of his league he was. "Cale," she said, her voice smooth and commanding. "We need to talk." Cale stood up from the window, feeling a mix of frustration and confusion. "About what?" he asked. "You've made it pretty clear where I stand in all of this." Lyra raised an eyebrow but didn't respond immediately. Instead, she stepped closer, her violet eyes locked onto his. "You think you understand the situation, but you don't. This isn't just about you and me, Cale. It's about something much bigger." "I'm not interested in whatever political games you're playing," Cale snapped. "I'm not a part of this world. I never asked for any of this." Lyra's gaze softened, though only slightly. "You don't have to be interested in it, but you are part of it now, and whether you like it or not, you have a role to play." Cale clenched his fists, his anger rising. "I didn't ask for this role. I didn't ask to be your husband, and I sure as hell didn't ask to be dragged into your empire's mess." Lyra stepped forward, her voice unwavering. "You don't have to understand everything right now, Cale, but you will. In time, you'll realize that the fate of the galaxy is tied to the decisions we make, and your presence, your role, is crucial to the balance of power." Cale felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had heard her talk about power and balance before, but it didn't make any sense to him. Why him? Why was he the one chosen? He had no special skills, no political connections. He was just a human, a small part of a vast galaxy. He couldn't see how he could possibly make a difference. "I'm just a guy," Cale said, his voice quieter now. "I'm not part of your world. I'm just here because of a contract I didn't sign, tied to a life I never wanted." Lyra studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face as if she was trying to read his thoughts. "You don't understand yet," she said softly, "but you will, and when you do, you'll see why this is happening. You'll see why we need each other." Cale didn't respond. He couldn't find the words. The more he thought about it, the more hopeless it seemed. He was stuck, caught between his own desires and the responsibilities thrust upon him by the contract. He had no choice but to follow through, but every day felt like a battle against his own will. "Come with me," Lyra said, breaking his thoughts. "There is something you need to see." Cale followed her out of the room, the familiar weight of uncertainty hanging over him. He had no idea where they were going, but he didn't ask. Part of him felt like he was just being dragged along, a passive passenger in his own life. They walked down long, polished hallways, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the silence. The Vale station was a maze of sleek metal corridors, each one leading to a new part of the sprawling facility. Everything here felt cold and distant, as if it was designed for something far more powerful than humans. As they moved deeper into the heart of the station, Kale couldn't help but feel out of place. They reached a large room, its walls covered in intricate symbols and holographic displays. At the center of the room stood a massive platform, its surface covered with more alien technology that Kale couldn't begin to understand. Lyra motioned for him to step closer, and he hesitated for a moment before obeying. "What is this?" Kale asked, his curiosity piqued despite himself. "This," Lyra said, her voice reverberating with a quiet authority, "is the heart of the Vale Empire. This is where the true power of the Vale lies, the source of our strength, our legacy." Kale looked around, his eyes widening in awe. The room was filled with ancient technology, devices that hummed with energy Kale couldn't even begin to understand. There were holographic maps of distant star systems, detailed records of wars fought long ago, and vast stores of knowledge that seemed to span centuries. "You see," Lyra continued, "the Vale are not just a race. We are the keepers of the galaxy's balance. We maintain peace, order, and power across the stars, but we cannot do it alone. We need allies and we need strength. That's where you come in." Kale felt a pang of confusion. "I don't have any strength, I'm just a human." Lyra turned to him, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. "You may not understand it now, Kale, but you have something the Vale need. You have the resilience, the adaptability, and the will to survive. Those are qualities that cannot be found in every species, and that, Kale, is why you are here." Kale took a deep breath, trying to wrap his mind around what she was saying. It still didn't make sense to him. How could he, a simple engineer, have any kind of role in the grand scheme of things? He didn't feel powerful or important. He just felt ordinary. But as he looked at Lyra, standing so confidently before him, he realized that she believed what she was saying. She believed that his presence here in this cold, alien place had some kind of meaning, and in a way that was even more unsettling than everything else. "Why me?" Kale asked again, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you choose me?" Lyra didn't answer immediately. She simply walked over to one of the displays and activated it. A map of the galaxy appeared, showing the vast expanse of stars and planets. She pointed to a distant cluster of systems. "This is where we are headed," Lyra said. "This is the Vale Empire's greatest challenge. The Azun, a rival faction, threatens our power. We cannot afford to lose. You may not understand it yet, but your role in this war will be crucial." Kale stood there, trying to comprehend what she was saying. A war. The Vale were preparing for a war, and he somehow was involved in it. "I'm just a guy," Kale muttered again, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "I'm not a soldier, I'm not a fighter, I'm not what you need." Lyra turned to him, her expression softening ever so slightly. "You're more than you think, Kale, and you will see that soon enough." Kale didn't know how to respond. He didn't know what to think. His life had been upended in a way he could never have predicted, and he had no idea how to make sense of it all. But as Lyra continued to speak, as the holographic map flickered with images of distant stars and ships, he realized that there was no turning back. This was his life now. And whatever happened next, he would have to face it. Kale stood before the grand hall, the enormous doors of the Vale Palace looming in front of him like the entrance to another world. It was strange to him how fast everything had changed. Only a few days ago, he had been a simple engineer, drifting through the endless expanse of space on mundane missions. Now, he was here, standing in the heart of the Vale Empire, caught in a web of politics, power, and destiny that he didn't understand. Lyra stood beside him, her presence as commanding as ever. She had explained in vague terms the importance of his role in the Vale Empire, but Kale had yet to fully grasp what that meant. He had been told he would be tested, that his worth would be proven through trials, challenges that would test his strength, intelligence, and resolve. At first, Kale had thought it was some kind of absurd formality, but now, as he stood on the threshold of the hall, he realized this was no game. These trials were a serious matter, ones that could determine his future, and perhaps the fate of the Vale themselves. Lyra turned to him, her eyes scanning his face as if assessing his readiness. "Are you prepared for what's ahead, Kale?" she asked, her voice low but steady. Kale didn't respond immediately. His mind was still swirling with confusion and uncertainty. He didn't want to be here, didn't want any of this, but the reality was undeniable. He was bound to Lyra, tied to her through the Galactic contract. and now he had to prove himself. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready for this," Kale muttered, his voice heavy with frustration. "But I guess I don't have much of a choice, do I?" Lyra's lips curled into a faint smile, though there was no warmth in it. "No, you don't, but you will find your way. You have the strength to survive this, Kale. I've seen it in you." Kale couldn't help but feel a spark of anger at her words. He wasn't a warrior, wasn't a ruler. He was just a man, an engineer, caught in the middle of something far beyond his understanding. What did she see in him? Why was he so important? Before Kale could voice his frustrations, the massive doors before them slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a vast arena beyond. The space was dimly lit, the shadows of the high walls stretching far above them. In the center of the room stood an ancient stone pedestal, its surface worn with age. Surrounding it were several large platforms, each one holding a different challenge, beasts, weapons, and strange devices that Kale couldn't even begin to identify. "This is where it all begins," Lyra said, her tone serious now. "You will face the trials of the Veil, tests designed to prove your worth. If you fail, you will have no place in our world. If you succeed, you will prove yourself not just as my husband, but as a partner in the future of the Veil." Kale took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. The trials ahead were far from simple. They weren't just about physical strength. No, these trials were meant to test every aspect of him: his intelligence, his courage, his ability to adapt under pressure. A voice echoed through the chamber, deep and resonant. It seemed to come from all directions, filling the vast space with its power. "Let the trials begin," the voice said. Kale stepped forward, his boots clicking on the cold stone floor. The first trial was simple enough, an obstacle course that tested his agility and speed. He was to navigate a series of moving platforms, avoid traps, and make it to the other side without falling. It didn't sound too bad, but Kale quickly learned that the Veil didn't do anything halfway. The platforms were slick with some kind of alien substance, making every step treacherous. The traps were hidden, invisible until the last second, and the obstacles seemed to multiply with every step he took. Kale's heart pounded in his chest as he jumped from one platform to the next, his arms flailing to keep balance. He was used to working with machinery, not jumping across treacherous gaps. But as he focused on the task at hand, something inside him clicked. He wasn't just going to survive this trial. He was going to prove himself. He pushed through the pain in his legs, ignoring the burn in his muscles as he leapt from one moving platform to the next, narrowly avoiding the traps that seemed to spring out of nowhere. He made it to the final platform, breathless and sweating, but alive. The voice echoed again, this time with a tone of approval. "You have passed the first trial," the voice intoned. Kale didn't have time to celebrate. The next trial was already beginning. This time he was faced with a beast, a large, hulking creature with glowing red eyes and jagged, razor-sharp teeth. It snarled at him, its massive body tense with aggression. Kale instinctively took a step back, but then he remembered what Lyra had said. This was a test of courage, a test of his ability to adapt and survive. He reached for the weapon that had been provided, a sleek metallic spear. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. The beast charged at him with a roar, its massive feet pounding the stone floor. Kale didn't hesitate. He ducked to the side, narrowly avoiding the creature's massive claws as they slashed through the air where he had just been standing. He was quick enough to avoid the beast's deadly strikes, but he knew he couldn't keep dodging forever. He waited for the right moment, watching the creature's movements closely. When it lunged at him again, Kale sidestepped and drove the spear into its side, right into the gap between its thick armor-like scales. The creature let out a roar of pain, stumbling back. Kale didn't stop. He kept pressing forward, jabbing at the beast with everything he had until, finally, it fell to the ground, defeated. The voice echoed once more, this time with a note of approval in its tone. "You have passed the second trial." Kale stood over the fallen beast, panting heavily. His heart was still racing, but there was a sense of pride swelling within him. He had faced the creature head-on, fought back against the fear that threatened to paralyze him. He had survived, but there was no time to rest. The final trial was waiting. This trial was different from the others. It wasn't physical. It was mental. Kale was placed in a large room, one that seemed to shift and change with every passing second. The walls warped around him, and the floor seemed to move beneath his feet. Strange images flashed before his eyes, visions of different worlds, different realities. He saw images of the Vale Empire, of wars fought and won, of distant planets burning and falling into chaos. He saw Lyra standing alone in the ruins of her world, her eyes filled with sadness and regret. He tried to shake off the feelings of panic that rose within him, but they were overwhelming. He was trapped, surrounded by visions of loss and destruction. The walls closed in on him, and the weight of the situation pressed down on him like a vice. His mind was racing, and he couldn't make sense of anything. The voice spoke again, this time soft and almost soothing. "Choose, Kale, what will you fight for? What will you sacrifice to secure the future of the Vale?" The question hit him like a punch to the gut. What was he fighting for? He didn't want power, he didn't want to rule, he just wanted to be free. But he realized in that moment that his freedom was no longer just his own. It was tied to something much larger than himself. The galaxy, the Vale Empire, and Lyra, all of them depended on him now. He took a deep breath, steadying himself as the visions continued to swirl around him. He focused on the one thing that mattered most: survival, not just for himself, but for the galaxy, for the future. He would do whatever it took to make sure the future was one worth fighting for. With that thought, the walls seemed to recede. The visions cleared and the room returned to its original state. The voice echoed once more. "You have passed the third trial." Kale stood in silence, the weight of the trials finally beginning to sink in. He had proven himself, not just to the Vale, but to himself. He had faced the challenges, faced his fears, and had come out stronger. The trials were not just a test of his strength, but of his character. And for the first time since he had been thrust into this world, Kale felt like he might actually have a place in it. Lyra entered the room, her eyes filled with something like approval, though her expression was still as unreadable as ever. "Well done, Kale," she said. "You have passed the trials." Kale nodded, his body sore from the challenges he had faced. He wasn't sure what came next, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't the same man who had walked into this place. He had survived the trials, and now he was ready to face whatever came next.